Let's look at another objection that is quite common among Protestant YouTubers, which could go under the heading of all in the same boat, or the infinite regress of interpretation objection. Let's start with some questions I asked Sean Luke of Anglican Aesthetics. How exactly does a text or tradition, which is inherently subject to interpretation, bind anyone's conscience? Only an incarnational agent, here and now, can bind the conscience to a particular interpretation of Scripture or tradition. You believe the Anglican Church? Which one and why? You believe the Anglican Church can bind the conscience of every Christian to a certain interpretation of Scripture or tradition, such that a Christian cannot legitimately disagree by appeal to their own interpretation of Scripture and tradition? And then I think I asked him if that is what his church teaches. Sean Luke responded, "What kind of question is that? You still need to interpret what your allegedly incarnational authority says to you. If interpretations couldn't bind conscience, then an allegedly incarnational authority could not do so either, because you still have to interpret what they say. That's literally just the nature of language." So, Sean Luke is saying Catholics and Protestants are all in the same boat. Scripture has to be interpreted. What the Magisterium has to say has to be interpreted. So, if Protestant interpretation is not good enough, neither is Catholic interpretation. And though Sean Luke doesn't mention it here, other Protestant YouTubers have tried to reduce the Catholic argument to absurdity by saying the Catholic position would require an infinite regress of interpreters or interpretations. But I was ready for such an objection, and I'll give credit where credit is due. Michael Lofton was the first Catholic apologist I heard give a strong and persuasive answer to this objection, and I've borrowed it ever since. I responded somewhat bluntly. That is such a dumb popular objection / response. An incarnational authority here and now can always further clarify and explain what it meant till all ambiguity is removed. No text can ever do that because of its static nature. Is that not obvious? That's literally just the nature of a living, breathing agent rather than a static text. You're trying this angle of we're all in the same boat again when it obviously doesn't work because of the distinction just made between a living agent and a static text. And the example that Michael Lofton gave was the papal proclamations regarding Marian dogmas, like the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption. Are those dogmas somehow unclear, requiring further interpretation by most Catholics and Protestants? Does anyone, Catholic or Protestant, complain about any ambiguity in those decrees and teachings? Another example would be when the First Council of Constantinople further clarifies dogmas, adding to the Nicene Creed to create the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed. The prior creed was not sufficiently clear, apparently, to rebuke certain heresies, and so the Church spoke again and clarified its teaching and its creed. That's what an incarnational authority can do, and what a text cannot do, whether it's the text of Scripture or the text of a creed. If you'd like to see more patristic evidence for the papacy beyond Clement of Rome, both early on and throughout the first millennium, check out my video on whether the Roman Church can lose its preeminent authority. Sean Luke of Anglican Aesthetics thinks it can lose its authority, and that it has, and claims that the early fathers never said it couldn't lose it. In that video, I show Sean Luke is incorrect, that the fathers did believe Rome could never lose its preeminent authority, And they loved quoting Matthew 16:18 to show that. But the great thing about Sean Luke is that he implicitly concedes that the patristic testimony affirms the preeminence of the Church of Rome. You can't lose something you don't already have.